Queen's University Belfast. Without further ado, I'll let Laura introduce her topic for today for you and ask her to speak now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just share my screen. Okay, a very warm welcome to this seminar on marginalised maritime heritage in Belfast Port communities. Ian's given you some information on my research interests. I'll just add to that with a short list here of the heritage projects that I've been involved in leading up to this. I worked for UHI at the Centre for Mountain Studies on a project on the development of ecotourism in sustainable heritage areas, and for Galloway and Southern Ayrshire Biosphere Reserve on a community natural and cultural heritage project called Place, before coming to Queen's University Belfast to work on PERICLES, which is where the research I'm presenting to you today comes from. And I've also done some work with assistance from the Scottish Arctic Club on heritage in Svalbard. So the PERICLES project, PERICLES stands for Preserving and Sustainably Governing Cultural Heritage and Landscapes in European Coastal and Maritime Regions. It's an EU-funded research and innovation project that began in 2018 and it's finishing up this year. PERICLES aims to develop and demonstrate a comprehensive framework to understand, preserve and utilise this maritime cultural heritage for societal good. And we're working across 6 seas using 29 demos in 8 case regions. At the heart of the PERICLES project, and where you can find details of all the cultural heritage markers that are mapped for the work that I'm going to talk to you about today, is the PERICLES portal. This is a bespoke GIS mapping platform for heritage data collection and analysis. It's designed specifically from the project, and it's taken most of the project to refine it. You can plot points, polygons and trails. You can add all manner of media to it. And the public launch of the portal was in January 2020, and that's ongoing. So we invite members of the public to come and add further heritage to this. We've just done some user testing in the last couple of months to hopefully improve the user experience. So do go and have a look at that. But one question that always follows immediately from any mention of the portal is what happens to it when the project ends. So I'll just address this here for you now. The exact plan for the platform itself is slightly undecided, but it's expected to exist as is in some capacity for a number of years beyond the project. But this may be closed to new entries and simply be for viewing. That much is yet to be decided, but it will be in the very near future. Crucially, there will be data transfer, both at the European level to EMODnet and at local levels. So, for example, we've been in discussion about transferring the Northern Irish data out to another organisation for them to use and curate. So any data that anybody does want to go in and add for us, that will be used. The plan is also for it to be developed as a tool to identify heritage at risk, to help integrate heritage into marine plans, and as a trigger for identifying heritage narratives and values. And we've been using it somewhat in that respect in the Belfast case study. The case study down at Belfast Port is for the demonstration on exploring maritime cultural industrial heritage. The overall aim of this was to analyse how space, place and identity is or has been mobilised to produce cultural heritage on the site where the shipyards once stood, and what forms of contestation have emerged, particularly through the redevelopment of the area. We explore the tactics used to reclaim or claim this space and the narratives about it. We're also interested in exploring the link between tangible and intangible forms of cultural heritage within these narratives, and that was something we went into more in the interviews. So that's the parameters within which I'm going to be talking to you today. And wherever possible, I illustrate with photos of real examples of maritime cultural heritage. So we'll be going on a wee tour of East Belfast through those, which is nice in these times when we're all shut in. So the battle for representation almost on waterfronts. The issue of contested heritage representation in waterfront redevelopments is not by any means unique to Belfast, or even to cities where culture is known to be or might be expected to be contested. We found several examples just looking through the literature for Europe, and there will be more. The insufficient nurturing of identity in the constructed brand of redevelopment that's evident in these cases highlights a common failure in port heritage preservation and development when these water redevelopments take place. The diversity of cultures that interact with and claim ownership of heritage ought to be recognised in waterfront redevelopment. For these reasons, it's more inclusive and equitable use of heritage and space. It increases livability of the district and local economic sustainability. And there's an increased range and depth of tourist experiences that can enhance the commercial offering that is often the driver of heritage regeneration efforts and placemaking strategies. Looking at Titanic Quarter, this was redevelopment of the former shipyard area of Belfast Port, and it was designed around the heritage of the Titanic. The Titanic narrative was deemed beneficial as it both overrides pre-existing community tensions and can be readily exploited for tourism revenue. However, alternative or contested maritime heritages still exist in the periphery and are often an integral part of local identity. As communities have been marginalised from the space, place and identity of the port area, these other heritages are undermined and at risk, and this is what we're looking to conserve with work through PERICLES. It might be hard to believe from all of the Titanic references in Titanic Quarter today, and if you've been there, you'll know this around you, but the memory of the Titanic was for a very long time quite subdued. There was a silent period, what might be called a culture of amnesia, in the aftermath of the sinking. The sinking of Titanic at that time was linked to divided politics in Northern Ireland. The Titanic and its sinking had different meanings for Protestant and Catholics, and neither sought remembrance. In addition, other events came along. World War I started shortly after it. You had the Irish Civil War, the Troubles. The Titanic almost faded into the background because of these. But following the James Cameron 1997 smash hit film Titanic, there was renewed interest in it. And the appropriation of Titanic's memory in the service was used in the service of post-conflict city marketing and urban regeneration, whereby the new heritage of Titanic serves as a cultural tool to present a usable past, in which it signals the city's strong heritage as a powerhouse of business and industry. As part of the PERICLES project, Queen's University have been working on 3 elements of fieldwork. We have interviews, the majority of which were conducted in the same time period as the mapping, but a few weren't, and that's why the analysis of those has been delayed. There were representatives of key groups that we really needed to reach. The Maritime Culture Heritage Mapping, which I'm going to go through in detail because we've completed the analysis in that. And the Tourist Survey, which was ready to go last year, but that obviously had to have the brakes put on it. It'll be waiting for somebody to do it at a later date. I know they were hoping to have someone do it this year, but I don't think that'll happen either. So the methodology applied for mapping the maritime heritage markers, the mapping process took place November 2019 to January 2020. It was done in the 5 closest electoral wards to the port area, and we adopted a very broad definition of maritime heritage, which included anything that had a connection. So, for example, war memorials, sports stadiums, labour traditions, local icons that may have worked in the shipyards or at any time spoken or written about them. We gathered the location by GPS, photographs and a video clip. except if you're on the portal, the video clip won't be visible because we couldn't upload both that and a photo. Description of the artefact. Sponsor if known, and there were a handful of cases where nobody seemed to know who had put it there. Supporting documents, and then an analysis of the narrative, and a bit of that is included in the portal entries if you're taking a look at those. Overall, we mapped 60 of these in these 5 electoral wards. And this is just what we mean by maritime cultural heritage markers. There's a few examples for you. It's things like these here, murals, which Northern Ireland does like nobody else, plaques, statues, sculptures. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that's the James Ellis Bridge. It's a bridge that was named after someone who had a connection to shipyard culture. James Ellis directed Sam Thompson's shipyard play Over the Bridge, and nearby there's a bridge that's also named after Sam Thompson. I talked about the portal. These are markers, as I've just mentioned, they're all on there if you want to go and have a look through them for yourself. The information that was gathered during the mapping process has been written up to fit the portal entry template and style, and this is what a typical entry looks like. The drawing offices that are shown there, incidentally, is one of the examples that's most frequently cited in the interviews as maritime heritage conservation done well. And you can read about some of the conservation efforts in the entry for it. As I mentioned, the analysis of the interviews is not yet complete, so I'm only going to briefly refer to some key relevant points from them today, because I think they're really good at setting the scene for the mapping work. And some of these key points that came through were this consensus that tangible heritage in Titanic Quarter has not always been well preserved in the past. The value of demolished heritage in particular was not realised until it was too late, until the development had taken place. There was less consensus over whether it has been done better now. There was much more support about efforts that were being made in recent years. The interviewee suggested that cultural heritage had been reduced simply to make it marketable. And the overwhelming consensus was that Titanic narrative ignores other aspects of Belfast maritime heritage, and that communities feel somewhat excluded by it. But one interviewee argued that it has actually raised the profile of other maritime cultural heritage just by drawing people's attention to the fact that Belfast has such a rich maritime cultural heritage. And the Titanic representation has also been stressed by a number of people to have been done well. They're not complaining about what has been done in representing Titanic, but just that it's time to branch out, do the same with the rest of Belfast's maritime cultural heritage and explore its many layers. And with these last 2 points, it's important to emphasise that there has been a lot of positive work in Titanic Quarter in terms of maritime cultural heritage. Much of the work that's gone on there, particularly in recent years, has been done well. So I'm by no means making an argument that what has been done is bad, but rather the experts across the board were saying that the scope needs to be broadened and it needs to be more inclusive. Connected to this, on the other side, and looking particularly at civic or community heritage when I'm discussing this, it's also necessary to avoid the privileging of certain heritage by exempting it from scrutiny simply because it originates in the community, and there's this idea of it being more authentic. Civic heritage is as complex and contentious as official narratives. Groups will select, construct and commodify heritage to suit their needs as much in communities as through any official means. And it must be viewed in this light and therefore evaluated with no less rigour. But the framework which I'm going to present to you simply ensures a more equitable platform for more diverse heritage. It does not attribute more value to community heritage, and it doesn't necessarily go into the territory of certainly doesn't go into privileging, but it doesn't go into the territory of evaluating it. That's for a separate analysis. So using a customised framework, the maritime heritage markers were categorised on the basis of a duality approach, where we took sets of values, and they were opposing, and we put them into each category. This provides clear understanding of contested heritage and guides towards constructing a balance to reconcile official and civic heritages in particular, and also to reconcile the other imbalances. It leads to more inclusive waterfront heritage development and better management of contested heritage. The framework that we specifically used was built on one by Rabady in 2013. Rabady proposes an alternative civic-oriented heritage revival that allows reconciliation between official and civic cultural heritage. And Rabady's framework was presented through the example of Marabat in Jordan, where local mosaic heritage was made a competing culture by the introduction of a passive dominant official discourse of orthodox mosaic practices. And this was for mainly tourism purposes, but they were unrepresentative of local mosaic practices. The duality approach captures the scope and range of interpretations of the heritage landscape, and it's necessary in reconciling heritage in contested cultural landscapes. And so it's on this that the duality framework for the analysis of East Belfast cultural heritage has been based, and I'll introduce the dualities here. Ours has been extended from Rabady's somewhat. And we've expanded it in order to capture the important power interplays specific to the representation of maritime heritage in East Belfast. I'll be going through each of these in turn now, and as I present them, I'll present the results of the categorisation and also show two examples of each. So we'll be looking at them these things alongside each other. The first set of images corresponds to the first term in the heading, but these are also highlighted and made clear. Looking at pre and post development, the terms distant and recent that featured in Rabady's framework were readjusted to pre-development and during or post-development in the Belfast case study, as this was a pivotal alteration in the way in which heritage was portrayed in the port area. And what you're seeing here in the picture are examples of some pre-development heritage. The Workman Clark War Memorial, which was in the north yard of Workman Clark and Company shipyard, which is one of the smaller shipyards on Queen's Island, now Titanic Quarter. It's now preserved on the Titanic Pump House. Next to it, we have the Titanic Dock, which was formerly known as the Thompson Dock, built by Belfast Harbour Commissioners and opened in 1911 specifically for the larger White Star liners, the Titanic and its sister ship, the Olympic. So these two pre-development artefacts have direct connections to Belfast shipbuilding era and the workers who were an integral part of it. During the analysis, we had 19 of the artefacts found, or the cultural heritage markers found in East Belfast were of the pre-development stage. This compares to 37 of the post-development stage, or during or post-development. The opposing duality is heritage that was installed either as part of the redevelopment or designed to fit in with it, which views the former maritime industry of this part of the city retrospectively. You'll see the sculpture Titanic kit on the left. It's a contemporary artwork designed by Tony Stallard that was unveiled in 2009. And next to the recreation of Terry Bradley's artwork Docker's Rest on the wall of Titanic's destination bar Hickson Point. It was commissioned as part of the commercial development of Titanic Quarter. Much of the recent heritage mapped in the Belfast Port area celebrates the city's historic maritime industrial achievements as a symbol of power, rather than reflecting the history or processes behind these achievements. Not necessarily these two examples, but certainly the majority of them. They are retrospectively created to fit with contemporary heritage needs and primarily driven by economics. Much heritage that did not meet those needs or was not of economic benefit has been lost in the process. Our next duality was tangible versus intangible. As might be expected, the majority of markers were tangible heritage, and that's because tangible heritage is relatively easily recognised, solid physical items. Intangible heritage is a more ephemeral concept. It's unlikely to have a physical form unless anchored to a tangible item or site, and it's often held within individuals or groups, and it's not necessarily visible. And one of the things that also came up in the interviews was people who worked with the communities were saying a lot of heritage is still held by people here, and we don't really necessarily know about it. So intangible heritage needs to be enhanced or signposted to make it public. But this also brings optimism that there could be more to be discovered and developed, and it shows that work could be done in this area. So examples of the tangible maritime heritage here are the Samson and Goliath cranes on the left, and the Yardman sculpture on the right. One is an older piece than the other. Looking at the intangible heritage, the Yardman Trail, which is represented here simply by a photograph from the walk, it develops the intangible heritage relating to the shipyard workers that were symbolised in the Yardmen Memorial. It's one of several heritage and tourism trails developed by Connswater Greenway, and it connects Titanic Quarter to East Belfast, physically and in terms of the heritage relating to the areas, and as it explores the lives of workers and their families. Next to it, you can just make out on the side of that house the Sam Thompson blue plaque. It actually represents the heritage of a building that no longer exists. The house that the Over the Bridge playwright Sam Thompson was born in once stood in the space next to the one that his plaque has been placed on, but that was demolished during redevelopment of the area. Moving to passive and active, and this is one of the more difficult ones to define. Passive heritage offers a superficial experience. It's based on spectacle and it's designed for consumption, often by visitors. In contrast, active heritage is a more signposted experience. It's interactive and pedagogical, and crucially, it's aimed at including both residents and visitors, potentially with active participation from both. So examples of passive heritage, and these made up the vast majority of entries, include the Titanic Memorial. It's just a memorial for people to look at and to contemplate, and the McMaster Street Conservation Area. Looking at more active heritage, we found the Westbourne Presbyterian Church, known as the Shipyard Church, would likely to fit in this category. It's where most of East Belfast shipyard workers worshipped. The brick and stone exterior has changed very little since it was built back in the late 19th century, although the building has been enlarged a bit. Most significantly here, the church remains an active place of worship in the former shipyard community, and includes many families of former yard workers. And there is also a conscious effort to maintain its prominence in the city's maritime heritage. The Maritime Mile is an interactive heritage trail, which is just symbolised by a picture from the port area. It features Belfast maritime and industrial heritage on both sides of the River Lagan, and walkers are engaged with a range of maritime heritage along the route. Passive outnumbered active heritage mapped in East Belfast by 52 compared to 8, exhibiting the largest discrepancy in the framework. This could be due to the tendency for heritage traditionally to be more of a passive experience, with interactivity rising in popularity only relatively recently. But there are signals that active heritage is in need of more support and development. So our penultimate duality is official versus civic. The balance here, as might be expected, is in favour of official over civic. Examples of official heritage include the Great Light, which was brought into Titanic Quarter for display, and the Titanic Guarantee plaques on the streets where members of the Titanic Guarantee group of workers lived in order to commemorate their loss in the disaster. On the civic side of things, you have Tillysburn Park, which is home to the Harland and Wolff Welders Football Club. It's a site of important connection between shipyard communities and sport, and it would have been one of shipyard workers' main recreational outlets. Also connected to the Harland and Wolff Welders Club is the memorial plaque and tribute to 8 shipyard workers who died during the construction of the Titanic. But official and civic is one of the dualities for which the distinction was frequently less clear. In some instances, funding may have come from official sources and some or all content from civic sources. This is the History Girl mural. It was funded by Belfast City Council, Northern Ireland Housing Executive and Groundwork. The memories presented in the text, which you won't be able to make out here, but the text that surrounds History Girl, they come from community members, mainly directly or indirectly relating to the lives of shipyard workers. However, or the communities. However, all of these projected memories, they are strongly positive or nostalgic memories. They may have civic origins, but their selection and presentation are the conscious effort of official sources, in which case we decided to put this one on the side of official. But there are other cases where the balance leaned more towards the civic heritage, where initiatives perhaps were driven by local people or groups who have simply sought official funding to realise the designs. Lastly, our final category, dominant versus alternative, a large discrepancy was revealed between dominant and alternative discourses in East Belfast maritime heritage, with 44 dominant in relation to 16 alternative. The dominant discourse of scale and maritime heritage as a unifying concept to cover up division, which in the case of the Ship of Dreams mural is quite literal as it covered up a sectarian mural. It's evident across the area, including here, and you'll see Titanic Belfast and the Ship of Dreams mural. But the Titanic mural on D Street is more strongly connected to the working class people who were Titanic's builders and passengers, and to the location of the mural among East Belfast former shipyard communities than Ship of Dreams necessarily is. This is a monochrome mural by John Stewart. It was originally painted in 2003 but was restored in 2015. There's text on it which reads Titanic built in Belfast, with an arrow pointing in the direction of the Harland and Wolff shipyard. D Street, where this mural is located, was the main access route for workers from East Belfast going to work at Harland and Wolff. And there's another mural slightly further down the road on the bridge of it's a painting of shipyard workers walking. In addition to the famous faces of Harland and Wolff, chief designer Thomas Andrews and the ship's captain, you'll also see in this mural many working class figures feature, shipbuilders and passengers. The Titanic and Thomas Andrews are memorialised with their names and date of demise, but something I noticed is that the captain is not. The mural strongly links the Titanic to its location in East Belfast. It's more than just a superficial demonstration, and it asserts the maritime heritage of this place through its shipbuilding ties. Next to that is another illustrative example of alternative discourse, and that's the public naming of the Sam Thompson Bridge, which I referred briefly to earlier. Named after playwright and former shipyard worker Sam Thompson, this was the result of a public campaign in which naming it in Sam Thompson's memory was the most popular among local people. Sam Thompson's play Over the Bridge is iconic now. It was highly controversial at the time, and for 4 years theatres refused to stage it due to its candid portrayal of trade unions and sectarian dispute at the shipyards. But the continued popularity of Over the Bridge, even after all these years, and the public naming of the bridge after Sam Thompson are testament to the play's longevity and the influence of its alternative discourse in the shipbuilding heritage. The dualities framework that I've just presented to you can be used to identify opportunities for diversification and to manage contested heritage in 5 key heritage dimensions, as has been demonstrated with the Belfast Port case study. In all dualities, there is an imbalance, with most of these being large imbalances in Titanic Quarter and East Belfast. Distinct, varied and contested heritages have been replaced with the unifying spectacle of industrial scale. Heritage has been used to cover divisions and emphasize industrial credentials. But in the demolition process, which was not just physical, the connection to local communities was eroded. The opportunity to embed communities in the heritage of the redeveloped site was largely missed during the Titanic Quarter redevelopment. This can be resolved for the future through addressing the deficient dualities. And there has been work going on there where this has been recognised, and there's trying to strike more of a balance in East Belfast, in Titanic Quarter in particular. This involves the adoption of a strategy that caters to a wider span of stakeholders, does not focus narrowly on commodification of heritage solely for commercial needs. The examples provided also illustrate how deficient types might be strengthened. This could involve enhancing remaining pre-development heritage, both tangible and intangible, and specifically also increasing focus both on developing intangible heritage and effectively signposting what is there. New attention could be given to active heritage, and this is seen with the Maritime Mile, which is actually award-winning. Crucially, there is also a need for sustained cultivation of civic heritage so that that's not lost in the commercialisation process. This would also enhance tourism potential in the surrounding areas as opportunities for local heritage experience are developed. As a final note, just talking about opportunities for tourism and local heritage experiences, one of the outputs of the PERICLES project has been to produce a series of heritage trails from the heritage markers that were mapped for this research, both for locals and for visitors. This slide is actually from another presentation where I talked about community-based tourism and how that could be developed through reclaimed heritage. It's expected that these trails, which have been produced, will be made accessible to the public for free this summer. They are already on Easy Travel, although not accessible to the public. They have been completed and they're just waiting to be signed off. So if anyone's going to Belfast or in Belfast already, keep an eye out for those. So that's us reached the end of the presentation. I hope that you've enjoyed it and found it interesting. And I'll just hand back to Ian, who might have some questions or discussion points, and we can have a little chat about this more in depth.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Laura, for that really fascinating talk and outline of a really interesting project. But of course, yet another reminder of the impact of these troubling times on research. So yes, both fascinating and slightly bittersweet as well. So folks, there is now an opportunity, as we said already, for questions. Can I just remind you to post any questions you have in the chat box, sending it to everyone rather than all attendees. And perhaps whilst we're waiting for the questions to come in, I'll take chair's privilege and kick us off, Laura, if you don't mind. I'm really interested in kind of the tensions that exist around heritage, and particularly in the now kind of tired, I suppose, in a way, kind of dualism of authorized and subaltern heritage discourses, as discussed by Laura Jane Smith. I'm left wondering, though, still, in relation to Pericles in particular, you know, the really difficult issue that actually still remains in Belfast around the sectarian divide. And you know, kind of what you get around that are, of course, some of Belfast's most powerful, most contested, most contentious heritage, I suppose. Um, I'm wondering I was wondering as I was following your presentation whether these appear as kind of part of your kind of alternative heritage designation markers, so to speak. Is that where they're captured in this project, or perhaps they're not captured at all?
That is where they would be captured, where we've been able to. It's interesting that you were talking about the sectarian divide. When we were doing the interviews, we found that a lot of the heritage professionals were quite keen to sweep that aside. They wanted the maritime cultural heritage separate from that. But when you spoke to people who were involved in community groups, that was not so much the case. And some of the heritage it is contested along sectarian lines, and even talking to people, some people would sort of refuse some of the heritage and claim it's not part of theirs. Some communities who, even though they had historical links, they weren't even trying to reclaim it or put forward an alternative heritage, they were just refusing what was there.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, that is almost in a nutshell, isn't it? At least that first aspect of that, your very live tensions between the authorized and the subaltern heritage discourses. But I won't hog the discussion. We've got some questions coming in, so I'll turn to those now. Our first one is from Annie Thuysen. And Amni says, great presentation, thank you very much, as do a number of other people. Belfast is obviously a draw. And her question, Annie's question is, who exactly are the intended users of the PERICLES platform, and what do you hope those users will get out of it?
The intended users of the PERICLES platform are quite a mixed and varied bunch. We are hoping that, or we have had some researchers from not necessarily other academic projects, but people who are working on community heritage projects, on projects for like heritage councils or museums. They've been using it both in terms of adding to and to looking to what we've gathered. We also have the public as a very important user of the platform, and it's been designed to be intuitive and easily accessible and presentable and nice for the public to use, basically. So we really hope people will come and use it. Eventually, when the project ends, though it's not certain yet, my feeling is it'll take on more of an encyclopedic role, and then it'll just be users who want to browse the content for either professional or personal interest. But we've also been using it ourselves in our research. So whenever we've been doing any research in any one of the case study regions, we've been plotting our results on that so people can come and see that.
Okay, really very interesting. Thank you. And folks, if you've asked a question and want to have a comeback or follow up, please feel free to do so. I'll certainly pick those up as we go through. Our next question, though, comes from Jill McNichol, and it also continues perhaps in a little more depth the technical theme that is emerging here. And Jill asks about the actual mapping software that is behind PERICLES. Are you able to talk us through that, Laura, in any depth?
I'm not really able to talk about the technical side of the portal. We have a technical team based at the University of York who does that for us. But if you want to drop me an email, Jill, I can get you some details from them if you're particularly interested in the technical side of it. We've just used it arrive at us from them.
Yeah, it's often the case, isn't it, with these multi-stranded projects? You know, you exist in one aspect of it, but there are other kind of octopus-like arms to it that I guess particularly in these difficult times you don't get to find out too much about, really. So picking up on our next question is from Terry McCowan, and Terry says talks about Belfast maritime heritage being symbolised by Titanic at the moment. He then goes on to ask, is there potential to expand on the 400 years of the port and the international connections, for example, seafaring, merchant shipping, and not just shipbuilding?
Yes. Hi, Terry. Thank you for your question. I believe we've met before. Yes, one of the things that came through, not just in interviews, but is something that I'm personally interested in from the PERICLES project, is that we don't just focus on the East Belfast area and the shipbuilding area, because there is such a rich maritime heritage relating to Belfast, in particular on the other side of the river. And this is possibly what Terry's referring to in the dockers community, which has very much been neglected if you compare it to how much effort has been put into the maritime heritage of the shipbuilding community. So one of the things that we've written up, and as a recommendation of PERICLES, is that the heritage is much more, becomes much more broad, and it encompasses all of these groups who have largely been forgotten. And we think there's a huge potential for it, and I think that the Maritime Mile could actually really tap into that a lot. It brings people from one side of the river to the other, so there's a good potential to expand on heritage development on the other side and connect the two sides that way.
Thanks, Laura. That's a really comprehensive answer. And indeed, you might have tackled some aspects of this of the next question in that answer, but it does follow on quite neatly from that, and it's from Joe Rogers. And Joe asks that you mentioned some key groups had not yet been reached through your interviews or through the project's interviews. So Joe was wondering who these were, and we might have heard part of that already, and how the key groups, those absent key groups, were identified by the research team.
Well, we have most of them now, but there is a key group that we're looking to get. And I'll mention that just in a second. How we came up with the list is we did stakeholder mapping, and we looked at all of the groups that might have an interest in this, and we tried to find at least one representation of somebody from each of them. Sometimes we managed to get a couple, and that just kind of shored up our conclusions. We are really looking to talk to somebody from the short strand community, and we keep coming across brick walls to that. So if anybody listening is able to help us out with that, that would be great.
For those of us not familiar with Belfast's social geography, Laura, could you expand a little on that group, the Short Strand group?
Short Strand is a small Catholic community in East Belfast, which is largely a Protestant area. And it's very, very close to the shipyards.
Yes, and from my memory of it, it proclaims that that divergent identity quite loudly, does it not?
Yeah, although if you were there a while ago, a lot of the murals will have changed that are in East Belfast.
Yes, yeah, I was there last year, but we didn't get down to East Belfast quite so much. But yes, yeah, you're right. So that was almost, indeed it was, our last question for the moment. We still have time, folks, if anybody has anything else they would like to pick up on. I'll just give folks a moment or two just to reflect on that before we close ourselves down, and some of us run away and get some lunch. But and I know, Laura, you're doing another talk this afternoon, is that right?
Yes, I'm talking to the PERICLES Consortium this afternoon.
That'll be nice for you. What are you talking on?
I'm talking about, I'm taking a wider view of the works that we've been doing. So I'm talking about a lot of the policy work. Queen's University Belfast were leading on the policy work package for this. So in addition to Belfast case study, fieldwork and interviews, we were doing them for policy as well. So I'm going to present all the work that we've done on policy to them, and also a bit about the work we've done in Belfast as well.
Fantastic. That sounds really interesting. Well, good luck with that. And Joe Rogers, I have neglected my chairing duties, and I've forgotten completely to find out date and time and topic of our next talk. So in a moment, if you want to jump in and let people know, that would be fantastic. Thanks, Joe. That's really kind. But in the meantime, I'm just checking chat. No, we don't have any more questions. So thank you, everybody, for your questions.
I think another question just came up just now.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. So it did.
I just saw it come up very quickly there, but I didn't see what it was.
So it's Annie again, and she asks about tourists. I know it's not the main focus, but it would be interesting to, sorry, very small chat function here. It'd be interesting to research this kind of group. Oh Lord, hang on. Interesting to research whether a more multifaceted heritage offer would in fact be of interest to them. I don't think that's a given, sadly. Now, that's not my comment. That's Annie's comment. So over to you, Laura.
Exactly, Annie, and that's what our tourism survey was actually designed to fill out. It's find out. It's quite a comprehensive tourism survey, and I hope that one day it will see the light of day when the tourists return.
Yeah, indeed. That was the COVID impact that I was alluding to at the start of this. Such a great shame. Such a great shame, because obviously they're key players in all of this.
Yeah, and we could have done the survey the summer before, but we didn't. And with hindsight, if only we could have done the survey the summer before.
But you know, so many projects think like that, and are going to have made decisions that they now regret. But that is what it is. I'm afraid to say. So I shall go slowly through the chat just to make sure I haven't missed anything. So we now have from Joe details of our next seminar. And the next seminar is on the 29th of April, again, from 1 to 2 p.m. And it's on archaeology, exploring disciplinary edges. And it's being given by Dr. Antonia Thomas of archaeology at Orkney College, UHI. So no doubt that will be publicised in the usual fashion, and folks are very welcome and encouraged to sign up to that one. I certainly will myself. But it remains to thank Laura for your talk here, and wish you all the best for the rest of the project. And obviously it's impossible to do the normal thing, but thank you very much anyway, Laura.
Thank you very much for inviting me here.
Not at all. Our pleasure. It's been great. So thank you everybody for coming, and see you again soon.